The Atlanta Braves won their series against the Marlins 3-1, and the way that they did it on offense has been fascinating. Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today, a production of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can find all my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. I want to talk about the Washington Nationals coming to town this weekend for 3, a rematch of what we did in Nationals Park last month. But before we do that, Atlanta wrapped up their 4-game series with the Marlins with another dominant win last night. They got a good outing from Spencer Strider, although he did give up a couple solo shots. They got more fantastic offense. And it's kind of become a familiar blueprint at this point, the way that they do these things. Getting guys on base, getting runs early, letting their starter attack the opposing lineup, and then putting up insurance runs. But I want to talk about the process to get there, because the results have been great. And when you look at the aggregate way that the series happened, even with the terrible loss, the 12-0 loss in Game 1, where J.R. Ritchie struggled, Aaron Bummer got blown up so badly that he lost his job for it, the Braves still come out of this series with a +6 run differential and a 3-1 series win. Game 2, 8-4. Game 3, 9-1. Game 4, 9-3. And again, very familiar blueprint here. They get early runs, and because they are up early, they are able to then go and let their starting pitcher attack Miami. Now, Game 2, they're actually losing. Martin Perez allowed 4 runs in the first 3 innings and then kind of settled in and had 3 scoreless. And Atlanta was down 4-2 after the 3rd inning. But run in the 5th, run in the 6th, 3 runs in the 8th, insurance run in the 9th, and they break it open. But you saw it in Game 3, right? Atlanta gets a 3 spot in the 2nd inning. You saw it in Game 4. Atlanta gets a 2 spot in the 1st inning, adds an insurance run in the 2nd, and kind of roll from there. And what I've really been impressed by is the way that they've adapted the Tim Hires approach and really internalized when to, I'm going to simplify it and say when to stick with the Tim Hires approach and when to go with what they've always done, which is big swings and hitting for power. And so I dove into Statcast and I pulled up the simplest possible divide. At-bats with runners on base, at-bats without runners on base. We didn't look at leverage. We didn't look at score. We just did that. I do have something coming for the newsletter about how the guys do in leverage situations, right? Runners on base and the game is close. The game is, a 1-run game or they're down by 1. It's tied, tying runs on base or on deck or whatever. That's not this. This is just runners on base, runners not on base. And kind of looking to see what the guys do. And you can see how they are simultaneously not trying to hit for power when there's runners on base, maybe selling out a bit for power when runners are on base, but then also how using their natural styles, their natural swings, their natural styles of game, how that's coming out in these situations. So a couple guys I want to kind of highlight real quick. I think Matt Olson is a great example of a guy who's not trying to do too much, but he's getting good results because of his natural strength. Matt Olson, with the bases empty this year, is hitting .322 with a .655 slug. Really, really good. His whiff rate is 20%. A lot of that's driven by a swing speed, that's very, very good, 74 to 75 miles an hour. When there's runners on base, Matt Olson's hitting 304 with a 565 slug. It's a little bit of a lower slugging percentage, and some of that's because his launch angle is a little bit lower. He's aiming to get line drives versus aiming to hit, that slightly uppercut swing that gives it the loft and gets the home runs. So his slugging goes down of almost a full 100 points. But all of the rest of the inputs here are the exact same. His whiff rate is roughly the exact same. 20.4% with no runners on, 20.5% with runners on. And his swing speed is in that exact same range as before. The only thing that he really changes is the launch angle. And even that, it's only a few degrees different. So Matt Olson is roughly the same hitter. He's just really good. Okay. Drake Baldwin, though. Drake Baldwin is a markedly different hitter in these two situations. And I guess it makes sense for Olson. His thought process is he has this natural strength. And you heard him when he hit that big home run at home, he said he was just trying to, Ozzie was on first base. He was just trying to get the ball not on the ground. He didn't want to hit into a double play. And the ball just carried all the way out of the ballpark. But Drake Baldwin is a markedly different hitter. So no runners on base. He hits 314 with a 676 slugging percentage, which is absurd. His bat speed is 75 miles an hour, and he has a whiff rate of like 21%. When there's guys on, and his job is now to drive them in, his batting average goes up to 390. So he adds 76 points of batting average. His slug comes down from 676 to 512 because his launch angle cuts in half. It goes from 16 degrees to 8 degrees. His swing speed drops by like a full mile an hour. His whiff rate drops by 7% because when there's nobody on, that's when Drake Baldwin's taking the daddy hacks. That's when he's making the big swings, and he's got 21 barrels in those situations. Again, he's slugging 676. He's doing what you would expect in those situations, and that's why so many of his home runs are solo home runs. Yes, some of it is guys in front of him aren't on, but some of it is also when the guys are on, he's not trying to hit a home run. He's trying to shoot a line drive, sometimes the other way, sometimes not, but he's trying to shoot a line drive over the infield, advance that runner, or get them in. He has fully internalized what Tim Hires wants you to do in those situations, right? Mauricio Dubón, great example of a guy that has a specific approach that is rooted in, I'm going to shoot the ball the other way with runners on base. With no runners on, 236 average, 382 slug. He swings and misses about 18% of the time. Mauricio Dubón with runners on base, 361 batting average, 583 slug. His whiff rate drops a few points, nothing huge. He goes from 17 or 18% to like 15%. His launch angle comes down. It's more line drives. And he's aiming 2 degrees to the opposite field with his swing. The saying is that there's more than one way to skin a cat, which honestly, I've never understood why you would want to skin a cat in the first place. The saying never made sense to me, but you can see in what the Braves offense is doing, how they are, there's different ways to get it done, and they're all getting it done in different ways. Dom Smith, another guy that he is fine trying to get the power with nobody on. 280 average, 460 slug. Launch angle's like 20 degrees. And he's not come out of his shoes, but he has a pretty strong swing speed that is slightly to the pull side. With runners on base, 389 average and 778 slug, his whiff rate actually goes up slightly, which is surprising, but he's swinging 2 mile an hour slower, and he's trying even more to pull the ball so he can get something down the line over the infielder's head, over the corner infield. There's multiple different approaches, and what I love here is that a lot of these are working. And you can see the guys understanding the Tim Hires approach of, hey, do your job. Find a pitch to hit, put a good swing on it. But when there's nobody on, that's when their natural tendencies to come out of their shoes and try to get this stuff. One of the biggest discrepancies here is Ozzie. Ozzie has a 258 average and a 494 slug with the bases are empty. He's whiffing He's whiffing 24% of the time. When there's guys on, that whiff rate drops to 20%. His average goes up to 286. His slug drops from 494 to 314. He's not trying to hit for power at all. His launch angle comes down. His bat speed drops. And he's just trying to shoot a ball through the infield and give a guy a chance to advance. And I really like this version of the Atlanta Braves. I do think they're not walking nearly enough. That was an issue that came up. I really feel like maybe since the Cubs series, the walks have really kind of cut back on what they were doing. They still work counts. They still get deep into at-bats. But I feel like they've gotten better. Instead of just taking the walk and going to the next base, they've gotten better about fighting to get the ball in play and get a more positive outcome. It doesn't always work. A walk is you're guaranteed to be at first base. Obviously, a ball in play, you're not. But they're not trying to kill the ball here. They're not trying to just absolutely obliterate this thing. They're trying to get the ball in play over the infield and advance runners. And for the most part, they've been very, very successful with it. Now, that's not universal. Ronald has actually struggled in those situations because his natural thing, and you can see the adjustment, his bat speed does come down with runners on base. His swing direction shifts more towards the center of the field. His launch angle lowers a little bit. His whiff rate's the exact same. His production drops. It's also a small sample. He's only seen 45 pitches with runners on base. When you're the leadoff guy, that happens sometimes. But for the most part, I am very happy with what we've seen from this approach, from how they've melded what Tim Hires wanted them to do with what they're naturally good at, and they're kind of splitting the difference. And I think this is really probably the best possible version of this offense you were going to see. That's going to make you feel good. In just a minute, let's talk about what we saw from the pitching. Let's talk about the move back to a 5-man rotation and an 8-man bullpen and what that can do for you. We'll do that next right here on Braves Today. But first, this episode is brought to you by IQ Bar, our exclusive snack, hydration, and coffee sponsor. IQ Bar protein bars, IQ Mix hydration mixes, and IQ Joe mushroom-infused coffees are the delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel you need to win your day. The Ultimate Sampler Pack is a great way to try all of the IQ Bar products and flavors. You get 9 IQ bars, 8 IQ Mix sticks, and 4 IQ Joe sticks. And all of their products are clean label certified and entirely free from gluten, dairy, soy, GMOs, and artificial ingredients. With over 20,000 5-star reviews and counting, More people than ever are fueling their busy lifestyles with IQ Bar's brain and body boosting bars, hydration mixes, and mushroom coffees. Their ultimate sampler pack includes all three. And right now, IQ Bar is offering Braves Today listeners 20% off of all of their products, including that ultimate sampler pack, plus free shipping. To get your 20% off, text MLB to 64000. That's MLB to 64,000. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details. Welcome back to Braves Today. We're going to get to Washington coming up this weekend and the rotation that you have for them and how it maybe lines up the best before you have an off day. But we saw the Braves officially abandon the six-man rotation after they got to the midpoint of the 13 games in 13 days. And so they sent J.R. Ritchie back down. And Grant Holmes is now, I would argue, your fifth starter with Martin Perez as the fourth. In the order that they're pitching, it's the other way around. Sale, Strider, then Elder, then Holmes, then Perez. But I would say based on results at this point in the year, I am considering Martin Perez the number 4 and Grant Holmes the number 5. Both guys have worked out of the pen. And so, you've got flexibility there as you bring starters back. Hurston Waldrep would be the first one. You have the ability to continue moving guys around. Quick clarification here on something, by the way. The Braves claimed Maverick Handley off of waivers from the Orioles. He's a catcher yesterday, and they moved him to Gwinnett. To make room on the 40-man roster, they transferred Hurston Waldrep to the 60-day injured list. Just want to make sure you guys know that the move to the 60-day doesn't mean the 60 days starts from when he got put on it. The 60 days starts from when he was first placed on the IL, which officially was opening day. So it doesn't do anything to change his timeline. Yes, you are required to miss 60 days if you are on the 60-day IL. But that time starts from when you originally went on any of the injured lists, not just the 60. And you're going to hit the 60-day point for Hurston Waldrep like next week. And he's not coming back next week. That's not happening. I knew that Waldrep had been in Florida for a couple weeks throwing. He started throwing bullpens last week. Again, he's down in, from what I've been told, he's down in Northport. He's been down there for a couple weeks. He's been throwing for a couple weeks, but the bullpens just started. The progression here would go from bullpens to live at-bats to sim games to getting into rehab. I don't think there's any difference in the expected return date of, sometime at this point, probably the end of June. I think you start throwing bullpens. Think of this like a spring training ramp up, right? These guys normally report in early to mid-February, around Valentine's Day. And the season starts the end of March. It's typically a 6-week buildup. So we started throwing bullpens last week. If this is week 2, you're looking at the end of June. And that's if the Braves do the standard spring training time frame where you get roughly 5 starts before you come back. It could be something where the Braves give him a little bit more time, or if they need help in the rotation, maybe they give him less time. But I think the point remains, you're going to see, I would assume the earliest you would get Hurston Waldrep would be the beginning of July, the end of June, beginning of July. And the big question there will be, he does have a minor league option. Do they bring him back to the majors and take one of those swingmen? I would assume Grant Holmes would be the guy, and move him back to the bullpen. You can make a spot back there. Carlos Carrasco has been DFA'd and re-signed a handful of times. You could always give Grant Holmes that Carlos Carrasco role. You're not going to DFA Grant Holmes, but you can give him that spot in the pen and go with and put Hurston Waldrep back in the rotation. Question's going to be, what does he look like? Is that the best option? Because again, Waldrep can be sent down to the minors. Schwellenbach, Smith-Shawver, and Waldrep all have options. They're all on the IL. Now, Schwellenbach's never used any of his. The thing to think about too, though, Waldrep, this is his final option. AJ Smith-Shawver, next time you use his option, would be his final option. So it's in your best interest to bring them to the majors if they're good enough. And I think Waldrep, you'll have half the year. I could understand optioning him down, knowing that he's got to be in the rotation next year. Smith-Shawver, you're still looking at August, September before he makes it back. He had surgery June 9th of 2025. And so my thought process is if they can get him back for the start of September, I absolutely think the best way to handle this, just put AJ Smith-Shawver in the bullpen for a month. You get an extra bullpen spot, or an extra pitcher spot, really, because the roster expands from 26 to 28. Put AJ Smith-Shawver in the bullpen. Let him pitch out of the bullpen if he's not ready to be a starter in September, so that you preserve that option. So that next year he can compete for a starting job, and if he's not ready, he can go to Gwinnett to keep working on getting his form back after TJ, because that does, a lot of guys struggle with that at times. It is also frustrating. We're way off topic now. It's also frustrating how Tarik Skubal had the new version of the loose bodies surgery, and he's already thrown multiple bullpens. Usually, loose bodies is 2 to 3 months, as we're seeing with Waldrep, right? If not more. Skubal had what is called the nanoscope. This is the same company that invented the internal brace, Arthrex. And it's the needle that they use, the surgical needle that they use, is half the size of a normal one. And so it's a lot less invasive as it gets into the joint to do the thing. There's a tiny camera along with it, but it's a lot less invasive and disruptive to the structure of the elbow to go in and do it. He also, I want to point out, he also only had one small loose body. We don't know how many Waldrep had, but we don't know if Waldrep would have qualified for this procedure or not. The other issue is we didn't use the same surgeon that's been doing this. This was Dr. Neil Elatrache. He is out in California. That's who did Ronald's knee surgery. But the Braves, for all of their elbow surgeries, have been using Dr. Keith Meister in Dallas. I think he's in Dallas. Houston? Dallas? He's in Texas. And so we don't know if Dr. Meister has this available to him or not, right? But that is that's frustrating here. Skubal's already had multiple bullpens. He took 6 days off before he started throwing. He had a multi-inning kind of simulated bullpen thing the other day where he was getting up and down multiple times. And he was, quote, relatively close to game velo, and it was 2 weeks after elbow surgery. We didn't have that option, which is frustrating. But we're still working on getting these guys back. While we're in here doing injury updates, Spencer Schwellenbach. He got the clearance from the doctor, so he's going to start a throwing program soon. So he is behind Waldrep's schedule. If Waldrep's been throwing for 2 weeks or whatever and already has a couple bullpens under his belt, and we're talking about July, or beginning of July, my thought process, my first instinct for Schwellenbach would be to assume this is probably early to mid-August. So we'll see. We just don't know. Speaking of injury updates, Ronald Acuña Jr. left last night's game with a thumb issue. X-rays were negative after the game. They're kind of characterizing it as a bone bruise in his thumb. It kind of locked up on him. He couldn't really close his thumb and stuff during the game. They pulled him from the game. It resolved itself pretty quickly to the point where he was already lobbying last night to be in today's lineup. Hopefully by the time this show comes out, they haven't put him on the IL with a fractured thumb or something dumb. I say that joking. They would have seen the fracture on the X-ray, but maybe some sort of ligament tear or tendon tear or something in the thumb. Hopefully that doesn't happen, knock on wood. And this is all just kind of, hey, monitor this, not a big deal. But wanted to make sure I relate it because it happened in the game last night. In just a minute, let's talk about the Nationals this weekend. The pitching matchups what you need to know about this version of the Washington Nationals and expectations, I guess, for the weekend. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. Final segment of a little bit of a rambly and disjointed Braves Today, but Washington Nationals this weekend. Atlanta has the largest run differential in baseball at plus 104. The Dodgers are at a plus 98. So the Braves are not running away with this. But the Washington Nationals have the most runs scored in baseball with 280. Now, their problem is they've allowed 296. So, yes, they have, yes, they're scoring a bunch of runs, but they're allowing even more. But it's a dangerous offense. And obviously, we saw that when we faced them last time. The thing that I think is different now than it was then is they've got more guys going than just C.J. Abrams and James Wood. That's the two you think of when you think of the Nationals. You think of that big outfielder, James Wood, who just feels like he hits everything 1,000 miles an hour. And you think of the speedy C.J. Abrams. Outfielder Dalen Lyle, the last 2 weeks, is hitting .333 with a .971 OPS. He's tied for the team leading homers over that stretch with 4. He's driven in 12 in the last 2 weeks. Luis Garcia, infielder, .326 with a .937 on base. So it's not just Abrams and Wood. And, I mean, they're not... Here's the thing. They're still not good as a team, right? They just sent Brady House down because he wasn't hitting that well. I want to say in this same time frame, I just had it here. In that same time frame, he's hitting 200 with a .650 OPS. They just sent him down. They called up Dylan Cruz. But the good news here is you're not getting the best version of the Washington Nationals because some of their best players, from a talent perspective, like a Brady House or whatever, are not necessarily performing right now. And when you look at the rotation you're going to face this weekend, the Braves avoid some of the better starters. We saw what Cade Cavalli did to the Braves when you played him last. You're not going to face him. The pitching matchups for this weekend, Bryce Elder tonight versus Miles Mikolas, who has a .691 ERA, which I don't think I need to tell you is not great. And when you look at the pitchers who have allowed the most home runs in baseball, I guess on this team really, 2 of the 3 you'll face this weekend. But if you look at the pitchers in baseball who have allowed the most home runs, Miles is up there. Miles Mikolas is up there. Foster Griffin, who you'll face in Game 3, he's up there. They've both allowed more than 10 home runs this year. Zach Littell, who is one off the league lead at home runs allowed in 15, is you're not facing him this weekend. But you get Elder versus Mikolas tonight, Grant Holmes versus Jake Irvin tomorrow, and then your battle of lefties is Martin Perez versus Foster Griffin on Sunday. So from a pitching matchup perspective, these are all winnable games. These are all games where you should be favored to win. And in fact, Braves Today sponsor FanDuel, we don't have the entire weekend's odds because they don't really go outside of the day unless you're just a marquee matchup. Braves are favored by 1.5 with an over-under of 9. So they think a lot of runs will be scored. A lot of this Marlins series had over-unders of like 7, 7.5. Over-under here is 9. I think this might be this is like the second highest over-under of the day, by the way. There's one game, Cardinals at Reds, with 2 bad starters in a tiny ballpark. that has a higher over-under than this. That's only 9.5. So higher scoring game. Braves are favored, and they should be. The thing with facing this team right now is the bullpen is also, I'm not going to call it a mess, but is also something where they just brought Clayton Beeter off the IL and used him yesterday. But like, it's kind of a closer by committee, and none of them I think are that good. Richard Lovelady, they acquired him from the Mets in April. He's taken a loss this week. They've used Gus Varland exactly once in the last 6 days. The bullpen's not in a great place right now. They made Paxton Schultz throw 3 straight days. That's how rough this bullpen has been. Because Mitchell Parker had to cover a short start. Brad Lord had to cover a short start. This bullpen's been really, really kind of rough recently. And so you're in a good place here. This is a really winnable series. This should be a 2-1 series win by Atlanta. And the thing that helps here is I did like some radio hits and stuff. I do radio hits all the time, but I did some radio hits recently. And one of the most common questions I've been asked in the last week or two is there any concern about the Phillies? Because they have been hot ever since Don Mattingly took over as manager. And I said, no, not really. Because they played the Marlins. They went 3-1. They played the A's. They played the Rockies. They played the Red Sox. The Giants for 4. Like, they had a lot of bad teams that they faced. And they gained a game and a half on Atlanta in that stretch. They were dominant. Again, when you go and you look at those 4 series, those 13 games, they went 9-4 in those 13 games. They gained a game and a half on Atlanta, and they've now given that back. They have returned to 9.5 games back. They lost 2 out of 3 to the Reds. And now their schedule gets a lot tougher. So, yes, you have Washington. Then you go to Boston to play the Red Sox. Then you go to Cincinnati to play the Reds. And then you get the Blue Jays at home. And it's a Blue Jays team that is talented but has been struggling and is losing every starter they have just about. The Phillies, in that same stretch, they have the Guardians for 3 this weekend, which good pitching, offense is kind of questionable, right? Then they go on the road to San Diego to play the Padres. Then they go to LA to face the Dodgers. And then they come home and face the Padres again. So Atlanta banked wins early, which is smart. That's the thing we all kind of been talking about. They banked wins early. And then they held their own while their opponent, their primary opponent in the division here, went through an easy stretch of the schedule. And now Atlanta is about to get into another easy stretch of the schedule, while Philly takes on the gauntlet that Atlanta had when Atlanta had Seattle and LA and some of those tough teams. Now it's, and the Cubs. Now it's that version of that for the Phillies. So you feel good about where you are. You feel good about the way things are going here and how this is lining up to close out May and maybe grow this lead to double digits. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Both teams are 7-3 in their last 10 games. But again, your schedule looks to be much easier than theirs does. Also, there's no possibility at all of a sole survivor this weekend because you have 2 divisional matchups. But either way, that'll do it for Braves today. Please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you next time.